We're in the middle of Perek Vav in Melachim Alef. This is already part 3. Today's shir entitled "Of Wood and Gold," and we're going to do some work today in the realm of pshat, just trying to understand what is being described, what's going on. I can already forecast with near 100% certainty that some who are in our shir will, just like last time when I did something that could be construed as whatever the word is, raising hackles, people wondering what is going on here. So today, not from Midrashin, but just from Pshat, just from trying to learn what's going on, we'll of course have many questions on how some of the ways that the Mikdash is built and constructed, how it dovetails with our understanding of our relationship to Hashem. We know that in the previous shiurim, we saw that Shlomo HaMelech obviously patterned whatever he built as the Mikdash in Yerushalayim off of the plans that he received from his father. It's explicit in Sefer Divrei Hayamim that there is a very strong Masorah, that it wasn't just that his father drew these up, but that he himself, Hakol Bichtav Yad, everything was already written up for David HaMelech, as handed over to him by Shmuel Hanavi, and that there's a Masorah that goes back already to the time of Ma'amad Har Sinai, essentially outlining the distinctions and differences between the Mishkan and the Mikdash. Included within that are the expanded dimensions of the Mikdash versus the Mishkan, recalling that the Mishkan was 10 amot across, 10 amot wide was the Mishkan, and the Mikdash was in the inner space of it, 20 amot wide. Recalling that the length, let's say, of the well, let me leave that aside. We'll deal with width for a minute, because we're going to focus on one particular aspect of it today, as you'll shortly see. The focus last time was we learned, we talked a lot about the hewing of the stones and how they are prepared, and I also mentioned that it seems that some part of the Mikdash, some aspect of the Mikdash, was actually left to Shlomo HaMelech to use his seichel and his chachma to decide how to do it and what to do, right? We had spoken about that last time. We saw it in Divrei Hayamim as well, that the basic structure and even the elements of the dimensions, though they were expanded, are taken from these plans that are handed down in a Masorah, again, with the reference in Sefer Divrei Hayamim. But there was some aspect that was left to Shlomo to figure out, how do I want to do this? And we spoke about one of those last time, which is that even though the Torah says only the Mizbeach, the stones of the Mizbeach, should not be cut with iron tools, when it comes to the rest of the Mikdash, remember this was not true for the Mishkan, since the Mishkan was built not out of stones, right? When it comes to the Mikdash, it wasn't the case that it had to be true for all of the elements of the Mikdash, the stones of the Mikdash, that they all be cut, either outside of Yerushalayim or outside of Yerushalayim, and not even by regular chisels and the like. We saw different approaches, and one of those, and it's part of the Machloket, we saw already in the Gemara, was whether the shamir, how much the shamir was being used. That shamir, that special worm that we have in the Masorah, which is not, by the way, in the Pshat. But today we're going to confront another element, another aspect of the building that in and of itself perhaps will give us pause. I went back to my old files. So I talked about this last time. It was sometime in, I think, 2009. No, it must have been 2010 or some such time, because we'd started with Shmuel Bet and with Melachim Alef. But I have in my notes, which is interesting. I see like, oh, that's what I thought 10 years ago. I don't know if I believe that anymore or accept that anymore, but it's good. That's what learning is. You come back, you're trying to reanalyze it. So I did a whole shir on one of the halachic issues that's going to come up in this shir that we'll do today. And I don't know if we'll get back to that shir. It's sort of freestanding thing, but certainly the question will come up today. So I'm talking around it. Let's get in. Melachim Alef, chapter 6. Verses 1 through 10, we basically already saw, but Psukim Aleph through Yud, about the idea of the dimensions itself, right? The length, the width, etc. And again, by point of comparison, the way that it was in the Mishkan was smaller, but it was raised by orders of magnitude, not raised by he didn't change the dimensions. He just proportionally expanded them. And to realize that that's significant, but it's not. It's a change in quantity, but not in quality. I.e., he didn't add some new element to the mikdash based on what we read in the first 10 psukim. Now, the description here does include a sentence that indicates that the way that it was built involved a covering of all of the stone with wood. Right? Different types of wood were covering the stone. And then over that was an overlay of gold. So there's an excellent sefer that I have. I highly recommend. I think it's from the people at the Machon HaMikdash. It's called Otzar Habayit Harishon. 10 years ago, 11 years ago, we were in person. I showed it to you. So Otzar Habayit Harishon, HaMikdash V'Kelav, Mivneh Toldot Umidrash, by Rav Menachem Makover. An excellent, excellent sefer, but like everything else, it's an artist's rendering. It's not proof positive. This is how it was, or how, well, not how it will be for sure. There's another book that they have that I actually own also, on the Bayit HaShlishi. But like this sefer goes through the different machlokot as well, the different the arguments about what things did look like. The Mefarshim did not all agree. I'll give you one picture as an example, just to see. This is without any of the component parts, any of the elements of the mikdash, just the building of the sanctuary, inside the sanctuary itself, of the heichal, what we think looked like. So this is gold on the walls, gold on the ceiling, gold on the floor. There in the front is the parochet, that's the curtain. And there are certain designs etched on the curtain. There are designs on either side. These actually, you can't see it. It's too zoomed out, but these are actually doors, 1 and 2. They're open. Here's a curtain. The rest of it is a solid wall. Behind it is the Kodesh HaKodashim. And here, of course, is some kind of etching, it seems, of the Kruvim. On the walls here are also etchings. You can't see them because the side view. There is a more zoomed in view, but I'm not going to spend too much time on that today. We'll come back to that in a future installment of Bli Neder. But there are particular etchings. Again, Sharui b'machloket. Not everyone agrees what the etchings exactly were. I mean, it's described in the Navi, but the different translators and Parshanei Mikra have different ideas about what the design was. So an overlay of gold. Under the gold, there's wood. Under the wood, there's stone. So right away, since probably wondering, well, why is that? And that's, we'll get to it now. Mitzudat David, we'll see the pasuk in a minute, but Mitzudat David just says, why was it wood with gold overlaid? Lefisha kol habayit haya ba tuach zahav mibifnim, because the whole thing had a layer of gold on the inside. Ve'im tomar, if you will say latuach hazahav al ha'avanim, why don't you just put the gold directly on the stone? If you're going to ask me that, right, it goes on to describe, look at the walls. Very simply, it's much easier to carve things in wood and then cover them in gold than to try to carve things into stone. The etchings, it'll go better. It's much easier to think of it in a pragmatic way. It seems that's the idea, right? That for pragmatic reasons. Let's see the psukim inside a little bit to try to get more of a flavor of what's being described. So here again, we talked about the first 10 psukim, didn't cover everything. I'll give you an example. On the outside of the building, the inner space. Sorry, what you're looking at on the screen, I took it off. What you're looking at on the screen is the inner space of the sanctuary, right? The inside of the heichal, but already and with the Kodesh Kodashim behind it. But already in the mikdash, unlike in the Mishkan, the mikdash had some kind of other structure in front of it It's known variously as the ulam, like a hallway, basically. A hallway. It was some kind of a structure that was built in the front. In addition to that, there are structures built on the outside. There are some kind of cells or offices, or some such thing, storage to some, others is a place for the Kohanim to be. And it was 3 levels worth and built in a staggered way so that, according to, again, the assumption is that they describe it, there were staircases on the inside, circular, like spiral staircases, very, very narrow spiral staircases, so they could get from one to the other. So I'm not getting into that detail, so I want to move a little bit forward today. Pasuk Yud Alef, in the middle, we have an interruption. And there's a curiosity why this interruption is at this exact moment. And we'll come back to the reason why it's in this exact moment. We see a bigger picture, which we will not even finish today. We still need a few more sessions. But Pasuk Yud Alef on page 409 of the Koren Tanakh. Again, Melachim Alef, Perek Vav, Pasuk Yud Alef, chapter 6 in 1 Kings, verse 11. Vayihidvar Hashem al Shlomo lemor. We saw these psukim already, but I'm just putting it in context now. Abayda zeh asher atav voneh, im tilech b'chukotai ve'et mishpatai ta'aseh v'shamat et kol mitzvotai lalechet bahem v'hakimoti et dvari itach asher dibarti al David avicha. This house that you are building, if you follow my edicts and my statutes, you will fulfill, and you guard all of my mitzvot, and fulfilling them to follow in the ways, and you will uphold, I will uphold that my word to you or with you, that which I spoke to David your father. Very much about David your father. Yeah. I will dwell within the midst of the Jewish people, of the Bnei Yisrael, v'lo ezov et ami Yisrael. I will not abandon my nation Israel. Now we come to, and we saw already the Mitzudat David, sort of primed the pump and did it backwards, but Pasuk Yodalid, Vayiven Shlomo et Habayit Vayechalehu. Shlomo rather, built the house and he completed it. So that pasuk right there, we're learning together for a little while. What that pasuk doesn't mean in one pasuk he built the whole thing. It means that's the koteret, that's the title, right? He built it and he finished it. Because now it's going to give you the details. It's very obvious. Pasuk Yudalad, Vayiven et kirot habayit mibaita, bitsalot arazim mikarka habayit ad kirot asipun, to the roof, to the ceiling. Tzipa eitz mibayit, vayitzaf et karka habayit bitsalot beroshim. Different kinds of wood, right? The walls out of arazim, and then we have the idea that it was used for the walls, that it was covering on the inside, that it's sort of lining on the inside, and on the floor he has another kind of wood, right? The cypress wood. Vayiven et esrim ama miyarketei habayit bitsalot arazim min hakarka ad hakirot. Vayiven lo mibayit lidvir lekodesh hakodashim. It's already, like many psukim, it's very hard to understand what this pasuk means. It's the back area is 20 amot. So and he built this also. It's using a cedar wood, right? With the stones on the outside and the cedar on the inside, and then this place that he puts is on the inside. It's upon the wall, and it's called the Dvir of the Kodesh HaKodashim. Mibayit lidvir Kodesh HaKodashim. Chazal have a big debate in Masechet Yuma as to whether the Dvir is a nickname or another name for the Kodesh HaKodashim, or if the Dvir refers to what the Gemara called the Amatraxin, that perhaps the doorway between the Kodesh, which is to say the sanctuary, and the Holy of Holies is the sanctuary, the Heichal, and behind the Kodesh Kodashim was this area, the doorway, 1 amma thick. Debate and discussion. In the Mishkan, rather, it was a curtain, and here it's a wall. In the Second Temple, it was not a wall. Second Temple also was a curtain, actually 2 curtains, and the discussion about how close the curtains were. Did they also make sure there was 1 amma, 1 cubit in between the 2? So is already here like a discussion among the Mefarshim. I'm not sure what does it mean? Describing, right? So now, 17, verse 17, Pasuk Yud Zayin, V'arba'im ba'ama haya bayit hu ha'eichal lifnai. So the house itself is that the sanctuary is 40 amot. Ve'erez el habayit pnima miklat ha'pekaim ufiturei tzitzim akol erez ein even nireh. No stone was visible. There's cedar wood on the house on the inside of it, and this is the description which is up for grabs. Be for next time. What exactly are these designs that are described on each of the panels? Udvir b'toch habayit mipnima hechin l'titain sham et aron brit Hashem, and that's why it's confusing. In verse 16, it called it Vayiven lo mibayit lidvir likodesh hakodashim. From within the dvir is the kodesh hakodashim, and then it says, verse 19, and the dvir is within the house, internal. It's within. He prepared it to place there the Aron Brit Hashem, put the Aron there. V'lifnei hadvir, but before the dvir, or rather, excuse me, internal to the dvir. In verse 19, it sounds like he's calling it the dvir is the Kodesh Kodashim, but in verse 20, v'lifnei hadvir esrim ama orech v'esrim ama rochav v'esrim ama komato v'yitzapeu zahav sagur v'yitzaf mizbeach ares. So everything is again covered in gold. So in front of the dvir, or not in front, excuse me, lifnei here means within. Within the dvir is 20 amot orech and 20 amot rochav. So it's 20 by 20. Again, the Kodesh HaKodashim in the Mishkan was 10 by 10, so it's doubled. And it says here that it's 20 amot high. That's the height of it. So the inner chamber of the Kodesh HaKodashim is, it seems, a perfect square, right? It's 20 by 20 by 20. All the dimensions are as they are. That's at least on the level of Pshat. Not everybody agrees that that's actually really so. We'll see that perhaps, probably not this year. Okay. Chaf Alef, Vayitzaf Shlomo et Habayit mipnima Zahav Sagur. Zahav Sagur, that Mikra translates a very high type of gold, very precious type of gold. He covers it on the inside. Vayaber biratukot zahav lifnei advir vayitzapeu zahav. So again, various understandings of what this means. What are these ratukot of zahav? What are they? So Koran translates chains. There are different translations. What it means. Again, I'm kind of flowing through it now, so we get a bigger picture. And it tells you again, pasuk chaf bet, ve'et kol habayit tzipa zahav ad tom kol habayit v'chol hamizbeach asher ladvir tzipa zahav. What's the word that has come up again and again and again and again over here? 2 words, I think, right? To me, at least. I don't know. Maybe other people see other words, right? Well, 3 words. I have the word bayit, the bayit. I have the word, something over and over again about different types of wood, and certainly the word zahav. Again and again and again and again. Now, let's pause here for a minute and just realize that everything until now, okay, it was different material. In the Mishkan, there are no designs on the walls of the Heichal. They seem to be, they're covered in gold, the krashim, they're wooden panels, but they're not, there's nothing ornate about them. They seem to be straight away covered. Obviously, the Mishkan had different krashim, where the boards that were assembled had to be able to be disassembled. They had adanim, they had these sockets underneath, these silver pieces that the gold, that the pegs that themselves were made of the wood that were then overlaid with gold fit into. We have no wall dividing the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodashim. It's a curtain. We have the height is 10 amot. Here the height is seemingly much higher. In the Kodesh HaKodashim, we learned that it was actually 20 amot. The strangeness, of course, is that, and I don't remember if we just read this and my feeble mind didn't remember, or if it's not yet here. At some point it describes that the height of the Heichal, the sanctuary itself, is 30 amot high. So how could the Kodesh HaKodashim be 20 and the Kodesh itself is 30? Strange. But again, this is whatever the word you want to use. This is the material that the Chachamim trying to understand different things about the height of the mikdash. So actually, let me put it on the screen so you can see it, and then I'll get to the question that came in. So give me half a sec. This is from the book. So here, where are we here? Here, Rashi's approach. The Kodesh, the Heichal is a side view, cutaway. Heichal 30 amot, Kodesh Kodashim 20 amot. Pay no attention to what this is. That's the rest of the shir, right? The Gemara seems to say we have 30 amot here, and then we have the 20 amot being described are 20 amot of empty open space. There's an open space on top of whatever's down below, which takes up a grand total of 10 amot, and there's 20 above. Total 30, so it's 30 and 30. A third approach, which is that of the Radak, is that it's 30, and the gold covering is up to 20 inside the Beit Hamikdash, the Kodesh HaKodashim, and the top of it, this are not windows, but it's covered somehow in precious gems or precious stones. Excuse me. Whether it's, I don't know, I don't remember now what it is. It's sapphire, it's some kind of precious gems, or is it some kind of a stone that's overlaid with gemstones? It's not clear. It's not clear. But everyone's trying to reconcile why in one place it calls it 30, another place it calls it 20. The Kodesh Kodashim we know is 20. Where does the gold come from? Excellent question. Yeah, where is the gold coming from? There seems to be a lot of trade going on, and Shlomo, whether David we know already had a lot from before, and it seems that Shlomo acquired yet more, and we don't really have too much of a record per se, to my knowledge, of where it's from. If you look in Divrei Hayamim, if you open up Divrei Hayamim, Bet, so Chronicles 2. You'll find that there's also a description of the building that's going on. There's Chronicles 2 in the Koren Tanakh on page 987. 987. So it's Chronicles 2, chapter 3. Now, it actually gives you here the amount of gold in verse 8 and onward. Vayaset Beit Kodesh HaKodashim Orko al pnei rochav habayit amot esrim v'rochbo amot esrim vayichapehu zahav tov likikarim sheish meot. It's 600 talents of gold. That's how much they use. Umishkal mismrot lishkalim 50 zahav aliyot chipa zahav. So it tells you also how much the nails, right? The upper chambers also had gold. So something here about the gold. I'll have to understand where the gold comes from, because we already know in Sefer Breshit it tells us where that there, Sham HaZahav, etc. We learned already in that area. And Karen, thanks for pointing out that it comes from Africa, South Africa, predominantly. It's not the only place where it's found in the world, but certainly very famous for gold mines and the like, right? And we're going to see later. Many of us already know because we were through the Tanakh a few times, but also because we just know the stories. There's going to be a queen who's going to come have an interaction with Shlomo HaMelech, and she's going to be from Africa, and we're going to wonder, maybe there was already trade and things going on before, and then later on there was an even closer relationship between them. But it tells us. Later on about that. There are other possibilities. It doesn't seem there are gold mines, as far as I know, in Eretz Yisrael, but we learned that there was a lot of trade going on, a lot of opportunity to get whatever was needed for the purpose of building the Mikdash. That was the alliance with Hiram, and that we'll see it playing out later, and sometimes in very negative ways, but sometimes in positive ways. Now, stay on Divrei Hayamim from page 987. look at verse 10, and that's actually the next thing. And then we're going to flip back to Melachim Alef and see the analog over there. Verse 10, pasuk Yud, Vayas beveit kodesh hakodashim kruvim shnayim maaseh tzatzuim vayetzapu otam zahav. And in that place, now they made kruvim. And these kruvim were made in a certain way. They covered them in gold. What were they made of if they're covering them in gold? Doesn't say. It just says that they were made somehow maset satsuim with detail, touch the detail, and they were covered in gold. So they weren't gold. They were made with something else covered in gold. V'chanfei akruv, verse 11. Chanfei akruvim or kam amot esrim knaf ha'echad. The total of the wingspan was 20 amot. Knaf ha'echad le'amot chamesh magat lekir habayit. The wing of the one was touching the wall of the house. V'kanafa acheret amot chamesh magil lichnaf akruv ha'acher. So that kruv, the wing, there's another wing in the other direction touching the other kruv. Uchnaf akruv ha'echad amot chamesh magil lekir habayit. V'kanafa acheret amot chamesh dveika lichnaf akruv ha'acher. It might just be stylistic, if you will. It wants you to know that it was a 20 was the wingspan of 4 wings, 2 for each of the kruvim. And then it goes back and it tells you, 5, in case you can't add, 5 plus 5 from one wall, then 5 plus 5 from the other wall. We understood that, didn't we? But some reason it gives you the details. Curious. Then we have Kanfei akruvim ha'ele, porsim, verse 13. Kanfei akruvim ha'ele, porsim amot esrim. It's 20. Vehem omdim al ragleihem. They stand on their own 2 feet, if you will. Ufnehem labayit, and their faces are to the bayit, to the house. Not clear what that means, to the house. You're in the house. It's facing the house. Outside the house, you can face the house. You're in the house. The bayit, the bayit, the bayit. Remember, it said back in Melachim Alef, the bayit, the bayit, the bayit, the bayit. It kept talking about it, and we assume it means the Beit HaMikdash. It seems so obvious, yeah. The curiosity is really right here, because when you get to the next section, vayasta parochet in Divrei Yamim, verse 14, he made a parochet. So, and we'll keep going. There are other curiosities, but this is very curious. Everything until now, in the structure itself, seemed to be just an expansion of what happened in the Mishkan. You could argue fairly, wait a minute, there were all sorts of cells, these different rooms, chambers that were built along the outer segment of the Mikdash, and those weren't in the Mishkan. It's true, but they weren't changing something inside the Mikdash. It is its own question, but it didn't change anything inside. And here, there is no analog to this in the Mishkan. No analog. And as I started the shira, so I'll just repeat it again in case someone came on a bit late. The questions abound. Last go around, decade ago, there's a whole shira about this subject. Wait, he went and made these things and he covered them in gold under these massive figures. It's like I have enough problems trying to understand what the kruvim are doing on top of the Aron Kodesh. Now there's like there are other ones, and they're much larger, and they're standing on the floor. What's going on? It's very, very challenging to understand what this is. And of course, much ink has been spilled trying to understand what it means. Where did they come from? Why are they there? Again, to show you the picture on the screen, so you just realize, they're standing over here. This is a side view, right? So no matter how you imagine it. So in the front of it was the Aron Kodesh was placed here. It was the last piece that was brought in. They brought in the Aron Kodesh. It was not made new for the Mikdash. It was brought in, right? The actual Aron Brit Hashem. But this is new, and it's on the floor. It's standing there. So that's very, very curious and puzzling. And that's something that I want us to explore a little bit more today. If you look in Sefer Melachim Alef, now let's go back, page 410, 410 in the Koren Tanakh, Hebrew English Koren Tanakh. It's again Kings 1, chapter 6. And now everything we read until now there were some differences. He put some design on the wall. That's different. He covered everything in gold, including the floor and the ceiling. There was no ceiling in the Mishkan, obviously. So that's different. But when we get to Pasuk Chaf Gimel, that's where we drop off to some totally different place, because that didn't exist. Vayas Badvir. See, now he made in the Dvir, Shnei Chruvim, Atze Shamen, Eser Amot Komato. So listen to this pasuk. This we did not understand from Divrei Hayamim. We couldn't have. Again, that ambiguity. What's the Dvir? The Dvir is the doorway, or the Dvir is the inside. Now it's Vayas Badvir. So the argument is Badvir means it's in the Dvir, which is the Kodesh HaKodashim, or it's Badvir is within the Dvir, past the Dvir, which is that one Amma, the Amma Traksin, the one Amma doorway. Whatever it is, he made 2 kruvim. And they're made out of what? Atze shemen, from oil wood. That's literally what it means, oil wood. Eser amot komato, it's 10 amot high. And then we have almost the same psukim as Divrei Hayamim. V'chamesh amot knaf hakruv ha'echat, v'chamesh amot knaf hakruv ha'shenit, eser amot miktzot knafav bat ktzot knafav. So now it tells you about one of the kruvim, 10 amot from one edge of the wing to the other edge. V'eser ba'ama hakruv ha'sheni, mida achat v'ketzev echad l'shnei kruvim, and then there's another 10 amot in the other one. It wants you to know they're exactly the same. They're absolutely identical, and they're standing next to each other. The height of it, just to remind you, is 10 amot, and the other one is also 10 amot. Next, he put the kruvim inside the bayit, in the inner part of it. Vayifresu et kanfei kruvim. The wings were spread out. They were spread out already. Vatiga knaf ha'echad bakir knaf hakruv ha'sheni nogat bakir ha'sheni v'chanfeim el toch habayit nogot kanaf el kanaf. So el toch habayit means in the inner part of the house. Now, what's the inner part of the house? They're already in the Kodesh HaKodashim. Sounds like the inner part of the house means in the Kodesh HaKodashim. We saw the picture a couple times now. Inside the Kodesh HaKodashim, which is 20 amot by 20 amot is the space, let's say, for argument's sake, Rashi's approach and the like. So in that space, we have in the toch habayit, means in the inner part of it, the inner part of the inner part. Put it on the screen so you can see it. Using this approach, no, not this approach, sorry. Using this approach that the height of it is all of 20, okay? So the wings are extended, and from one edge of the let's say of the southern wing, southerlymost wing, to the top of to the edge of the northernmost wing is 20 amot. What's betoch habayit that the two wings touch? So that is here where the 2 wings touch, which I again, it's always an artist rendering, so a lot of disagreement. It sounds here like the wings are going up. But wait a second, we said that the total height of these kruvim is 10. So how does that mean total height including the wingspan? Not including the wingspan, another mystery. And within the wingspan, let's say that the middle part, the point where the 2 wings touch, is betoch habayit. You know what betoch habayit means? It means it's the inner space within the 20 amot, so 10 amot on either side. Exactly, there's a point there. That's where the 2 kruvim, where the wings are touching. And if it's at a height of 10 amot off the ground, so it's 10 by 10. And then here it does, according to what we see in this picture, sounds like it is more set back. It doesn't seem like it's symmetrically placed inside the Kodesh Kodeshim, at least according to this artist's rendering. Again, and then the Aron Kodesh goes in between the 2. We're going to unpack this a little more, but just to realize that's betoch habayit. So that's what we're seeing now in the in the Navi, betoch habayit, right? That's pasuk chaf Zion, right? Again, vayitain et hakruvim betoch habayit hapnimi, the inner part of the house. Vayifrasu et kanfei hakruv v'tigah kanaf ha'echad bakir uchnaf hakruv hasheni nogat bakir hasheni v'chanfeihem el toch habayit nogot kanaf el kanaf. Then it says vayitzaf et hakruvim zahav. Then it tells you that the kruvim were overlaid; they were covered then with gold. The gold came on top of it. Yeah. Then we learn about the designs on the outside. So the Mefarshim are trying to reconcile what is this description in Pasuk Chavtet versus the description that we just had one page earlier in my Tanakh. It's one page earlier. The description of how the design work looked, which was already a little bit earlier described. Verse 9, right? He covered it with a cedar. No, not there. Well, maybe I'm confused. I'm sorry. I must be conflating it with what I saw in Divrei Hayamin. Maybe it didn't mention it earlier. I thought it did. Okay, never mind. The point is, he makes the design at this point, or whoever's making the design, right?
Rabbi, could I be rude enough to ask an important question now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I don't have the iPad. I just have an iPhone, so I don't see your picture.
Oh.
So the artist rendering that I saw before is just two giant wigs. Okay, now I want to know, when did these icons become a standard imagination or usage? If I say that the eagle is the sign of the United States, when and where? And are you saying there are cherubim that are like babies and wings that are seraphim?
This is our description. I mean, this is what we have. I have no idea about the American eagle and the history of that. Good question. Don't know. Not related as far as I know, but the concept of kruvim exists already. It's in chapter 25 in Sefer Shmot, right? There are going to be cherubs, the kruvim, on top of the Aron Kodesh, on top of the Aron Kodesh, meaning where the luchot are. My point is that nowhere in the Torah is described that there's going to be these wooden, what should I call them? Kruvim. I'll call them also kruvim. Nobody say statue. Nobody say icon, right? But we're sort of scratching our heads. What's going on? Where did this come from? Why didn't I hear about this before? It's like, it's one thing if you want to make ornate designs on a wall, because it's very nice and you're making it, you're beautifying it more, and that's wonderful. But to create a new thing that didn't exist, and that could be leading us down a primrose path that we don't want to go down as Jews, that we're trying to avoid as Jews, right? Turn back with me. Helen sort of dovetails nicely with the next point I was going to make anyway. So let's actually go there. We'll see it inside, just to look at it a little bit. But before we do that, to see the kruvim, I want to see those psukim. So wait, let's finish the psukim. Look back again, page 410, chapter 6, verse 29. We just did, right? Their designs, big discussion of what the designs are. We'll come back to it. And I'm realizing, I think the discrepancy is when he calls Hiram to actually make them. That there's like a little bit of a description. It's a little different about what it is, but whatever, we'll come back to it. Verse 30. So the floor of the house, the inner and the outer, both of those, Kodesh Kodeshim and the Heichal, overlaid with gold. Ve'eit petach hadvir asad dlaltot atze shaman ha'ayil mezuzot chamishit. So again, this idea, he's making these some kind of doors, how he made them. And then there are different, there's woodwork upon them, covered again with gold as well, right? So and there's something here about how it was done. We'll have to come back to it if we have time to see it inside. Yeah, but there was the diagram I showed you again, best artist rendering. ושתי דלתות הצישון וכלל עליהם מקלעות כרובים ותימורות ופטורי ציצים וציפה זהב וירד על הכרובים ועל תימורות את הזהב. So here the idea they poured it over. They had the gold was poured over to overlay it on all of these things. V'chein asa, verse 33. V'chein asa lepetach ha'heichal mezuzot atzei shamen me'eit revi'it. So they're making this now. The next section is the entrance to the sanctuary itself, and it too has to be made in a certain way. The way that it's constructed, special description. It's hard to see it until you see the picture. Maybe we'll come back and see the picture inside. Okay, then ushtei daltot atzev roshim shnei tzlaim hadelat ha'achat glilim. Ushnei tzlaim aklaim hadel ashnit glilim. Liglo is to roll something, so they somehow opened whatever it is. V'kala kruvim. Oh, here we are. Sorry, verse 35. V'kala. That's what I was looking for before. V'kala kruvim v'timrot ufturei tzitzim v'tzipa zahav miyushar al hamechukeh. So this pasuk says that the carving on something here is of the kruvim. It's the image of the kruvim. Just like we had in verse 32, right? That we have this description of what's going on with the design work that's upon the paneling on the inside of the heichal, and then on the doorway we had it on. So again, you have the same. It comes out verse 18, verse 32, and verse 35, and each time the description is a little bit different about what actually the design work was. How it exactly looked. This, of course, again, fertile ground for all the Parshanemi crowd. Try to understand, well, were they all differentiated? Were they the same? They're just telling us different descriptions, different times. Why would that be? The picture of the kruvim, though, is not only the kruvim themselves on the floor, but etched onto various portions of the wall of the dvir area. We saw the image of the kruvim on top of the entrance to the Kodesh HaKodashim, and we saw each of the little panels seems to have one as well. The timorot are some kinds of date palms described there, and the turei tzitzim, little flowers of some kind, something that's sprouting, and he covered it in gold, and these were put upon it, put onto that which was had been made. They obviously shaved it, and then they did the artwork, and then they put the gold. Then vayiven et hachatzer hapnimit shlosha turei gazit v'tur krutot arazim. There's some kind of a court, an inner court. There's an inner court and an outer court. So what did he do? Where is that? Skip for now. Hard to know what that even is. Then we get the dating. Lamed Zayin. Bashana haravi'it yusad Beit Hashem b'yerach Ziv. In the 4th year, did they start building in the month of Ziv? We saw previously the Yerach Ziv is the 2nd month in the biblical months. The 2nd month we call Iyar, but the Gemara has a whole description that maybe Yerach Ziv, even though it's Iyar in the solar calendar, maybe in the lunar calendar, Yerach Ziv is already starting in Nisan, and from there the tradition, according to Rabbi Yehoshua, that the Yerach Ziv, the time of radiance, is the time of the birth of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. According to others, namely Rabbi Eliezer, that's not accurate. That really Avraham and Yaakov were not born then. Only Yitzchak was born then. The beginning of radiance was him, and that's Nisan. And that there's another holiday time period which comes later in the Chodesh Tishrei, which will be described later on in chapter 8. And that is going to be the description of the inauguration of the Beit HaMikdash. But for some reason here in verse 38, it says, it's in the 11th year. Started in the 4th year, ended in the 11th year. It's 7 years of work. Yerach Bul. Bul was another name for what we call today Mar Cheshvan. Hu HaChodesh HaShmini, the 8th month. Kala HaBayit. They finished the house. L'chol dvarav, according to all of its words. L'chol mishpatav, according to all of its statutes. Vayivneu sheva shanim. They built it for 7 years. Again, there's going to be a discrepancy. We're trying to figure out how do we make sense of it. Verse 38 here clearly says they finished in the month, which was the 8th month. Hold your finger here on one thing to see so you understand why Chazal were intent on saying, yeah, but even though it says 8, it means the 8th, maybe in the solar calendar, but in the lunar calendar, it was certainly Tishrei, because when you flip in your Tanakh to chapter 8, verse 1, we learn in chapter 8, page 413 of Koren Tanakh, 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 1, Shlomo gathered all of the elders, all of the sages, all of the heads of tribes, everybody came to bring the Aron Kodesh into, from Ir David, which is, into this place, Ir David Tzion, and to make now, Tzion is now going to be actually Makom HaMikdash, the Kodesh Kodashim. So he gathered everyone together. Verse 2, Vayikahalu el HaMelech Shlomo, Kol Ish Yisrael. When did they all come together? B'yerach ha'etanim b'chag. They came in the month of mightiness. Rabbi Eliezer says it was called the mighty month because of the birth of Avram and Yaakov in that month. Rabbi Yoshua says, no, it's mighty because there's so many mitzvahs. Beautiful ideas, both. B'chag, in the chag. Chag is actually a reference to Sukkot. Huachodesh hashvi'i. That's the 7th month. In the end of chapter 6, it said it's the 8th month. Now you tell me it's the 7th month. So can you reconcile the number of ways? The pshat understanding, I think, is very simply, it was finished in the 7th month. What was the last step? Was bringing the people together and putting the Aron Kodesh in. So when you got to the 8th month, Rosh Chodesh, Mar Cheshvan, it had already been taken care of in Chodesh Tishrei. That's one understanding. Pshat. Another understanding, though, is, again, the same discrepancy that we said, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Aleph, Yud Bet, has that discussion about the timing. So on Yud, I think it's actually on Yud Aleph, that we have the machloket, Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer. When was the flood? When was this? When was that? And they keep talking generally about Chodesh Iyar and Chodesh Mar Cheshvan as the 2 months in question when it's possible that the flood began. But we also have the idea at the same time that Chazal entertained the notion that really what's transpiring, somehow the solar calendar and the lunar calendar have a discrepancy. What's called Chodesh Ziv, the month of radiance, by the one calendar is still in the lunar calendar 1 month behind. Because part of our calendar, for those who just learned Masechet Rosh Hashanah, and if you know in general, we do believe in reconciling the lunar and the solar calendar. Vide this year will have a whole extra month of Chodesh Mar Cheshvan, Chodesh Adar Alef, rather. Chodesh Adar Aleph, an extra month added. I gave away something that's coming later. Okay, we'll come back to this also. The 7 and the 8 and the two months and what's going to happen with Yerav ben Nevat. We'll come back to it. Okay, so that's sort of just an overlay. We finished chapter 6. You know already. My next sentence is it's not really the end of chapter 6. It's only the end of chapter 6 because whoever imposed this on us, made us say, okay, it's a new section, chapter 7, verse 1, but Chazal have a Masorah that's not correct. That's not how the Nevi'im were written. That really it's the same parak, the same parsha. Where does it end? Oh, it ends in verse 12. That's where the paragraph break is. That's where there's a parsha stuma. That's the end of the parsha of the section. So we could keep reading. We're not going to keep reading right now because there's going to be a big discussion about what that is. We won't have it today. But Vet Beito bana Shlomo 13 shana v'yichal et kol beito. Shlomo built his own house, built a palace. Took 13 years. Is that what's referring to? So we'll have to come back to that to try to understand it and understand what it refers to. It's again going to be a description of the building, of a building. It sounds like it's Shlomo's house. It's the royal palace. And why is it inserted here? Is it showing that he built the Beit HaMikdash first, then he built his own house? Could be. It was a time of building, so put all the building things in the same basket? Could be. There's going to be a repeat in chapter 7, verse 13 and onward. It's going to describe that Shlomo sent for this person, Hiram, from Tzor, and he's going to come. He's going to be involved in some kinds of building. And the building that he's doing it's a little bit of a question. What building is he doing? I thought we already did building. We just read about it, chapter 6. Chapter 7 there's yet more building. So what's that building versus this building? So we'll come back to that as well. Okay. So in the remaining time, let's look at some sources together regarding the question of the Kruvim. And we'll still be left with a lot of questions. Again, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, that was like the topic. We focused on that a lot. So Rashi here, Rashi's approach, Atse Shemen, the A'e Zeta means it was olive wood. Eser Amot Kamato is 10 amot high. For Aglei and Bakarka Omdim, they were standing on the ground. Their feet were on the ground. Echem mitzafon la'aron ve'echem minadaron. One was to the north of the Aron Kodesh. One was to the south of the Aron Kodesh. Sochachim al ha'aron ve'al badav. Okay, so right here, Rashi. It was the wings, the wings or the Kruvim themselves were sochachim, means they were like a sukkah, is something that a canopy, covering, right? It's covering on the Aron and upon the badim. Orach haknafayim bechasim miktzat. The length of the wingspan was covering a little bit. Rochav habadim, to the width of the badim, or the staves that are in the Aron Kodesh. Sha'aron haya natun arko l'rochbo shel bayit ubadav boltim bepetach hadvir v'paroch geneged hapetach. So the Aron itself, whose length we also know, big discussion, which had staves, whose length we know. So it was placed lengthwise, so that the tip of the two tips of the two staves were actually sticking out into that one amma doorway, into the parochet, as against the doorway. Ubadav, the staves, nitunim biroshe orkan k'dei shiyu shnei leviim yichol nikanes b'neihem k'shenosin oto b'midbar. And the badav, the badim, the staves, were put at the edge of the length of it, so that two Leviim would be able to go in between them when they would carry it in the midbar. A bit challenging to understand what it means, but basically the staves moved within the structure of the Aron HaKodesh, and it's so two Leviim from Shevet, presumably from the family of Kehat, could go in between them when they'd be noseh it in the midbar. It's a bit curious exactly what Rashi means here, because the noseh ha'aron itself, described back in Parshat Naso, is variously described, in terms of the various components of what was being carried. Actually, why don't we go there first? We'll see it inside. Is in, sorry, I'm at the end of Parshat Bamidbar. Go to page 160 in the Koren Tanakh. 160 in the Koren Tanakh. It's Bamidbar, chapter 4, describing what they're going to have to do. The Bnei Kahat, that they were involved in the Ol Moed and the Kodesh HaKodashim. Right? The Kohanim themselves are going to be the ones at the time of the Melachim. They're the ones to take off the parochet rather, excuse me. And they're going to cover the Aron HaEdut. They're going to put the covering on top of it, the different kinds of coverings, cloth coverings that are going to go on top. Right? And then the idea that they're going to be, after everything is covered, so the Bnei Kahat are then going to come, and they're going to be the ones to move it. Right? So that's Pasuk Tedvav, verse 15. It's on page 161 of the Koren Tanakh. Right? So they have to be very careful, etc. At various other times, it's actually Kohanim who are carrying the Aron Kodesh. Again, they're not really carrying it, they're standing next to it. It seems to somehow miraculously move on it, go on its own, but that's the initial description. Yeah. This is what Rashi describes. And Rashi wants us to know that there's some kind of overlay. The wings somehow are sochim al ha'aron. So you can imagine they have the wingspan spread out, but somehow it's leaning over in some way, maybe something like that. Go back now to chapter 25 in Sefer Shmot, way back to where the description comes about the Aron Kodesh and about the Kruvim in the first place. Chapter 25, you can find it on page 92 in the Koren Tanakh. So the length and the width, it's made out of acacia wood, 2.5 amot length, 1.5 amma width, and it's a 1.5 amma height. A crown, a little, some kind of a crown that goes around it. We got 4 rings. We're going to have the 2 staves are going to go into it in a minute, but before that, we need rings for the staves to go into on either side. The staves are going to go inside, right, in through those rings. But again, it did slide, and when they would encamp and they put it in the Kodesh Kodeshim, they would slide the staves so that the staves were protruding again from the parochet. The kaporet, the cover, which we learn in the Gemara in Masechet Sukkah, is 1 tefach high. It's going to be on top. It's the cover, and it's the exact dimension of the box underneath it, so it fits perfectly. And then on top, and then it, according to some, there's some kind of a ridge that it fits into. That there's like a piece coming down. Not for now, but Vasita Shnaim Kruvim Zahav Miksha Ta'asiltam Mishnei Kitzot HaKaporet. 2 kruvim. And how are these kruvim going to be made? They're going to be made out of gold, and you're beating the gold so that you make them out of 1 piece. The 2 kruvim are really 1. The 2 kruvim are actually both completely made out of gold, and they're going to be on both edges. They're going to come out of the kaporet, coming out of the kaporet. V'asei kruv echad mikatzam mizeh, ukruv echad mikatzam mizeh min kaporet ta'asu et kruvim al shnei ktavotav. So here, ktavotav, excuse me, make the 2 kruvim, 1 on one side and 1 on the other side, and they're going to be on the both of the edges. V'kruvim porsech nafaim lamala. The wings are going to be going up. Now, does up mean aiming up, or does up mean going up together? So we learn here. So chimichan fehem al hakaporet. Their wings are going to be spread on top of the kaporet, of this structure. Ufneim ish el achiv el hakaporet yu pnei kruvim. What's going to happen there? The one's face will be facing its fellow's face toward the kaporet. The kaporet is the covering itself. That's the face of the kruvim. Kaporet al ha'aron milamala v'la aron titenet ha'yidur asher teni lecha. So put the kaporet on top of the aron. Ohel Moed, place of meeting. I will meet you there. Where's Sham? Where's there? I will speak to you where? Me'al ha-kaporet, mi-bein shnei ha-kruvim, asher al aron ha-edut, she'et kol asher atzaveka, atzaveh otcha el b'nei Yisrael. Where is it going to be? The space. The kruvim are over. There's a space in between the 2 kruvim on top of the kaporet. Looks like empty space. That's the where the Shechina is. That's where it dwells. It's careful to say it's not in the kruvim. It is not the kruvim. The kruvim are the appurtenance. They're the setting. They create the space where it is going to be on the inside. Now look at Rashi again on the screen. So now the other kruvim are outside. They're upon the kruvim and the badim themselves. Radak doesn't offer anything here that I could say is what's the word that is about the kruvim themselves. He's more focused on, wait a second, what kind of wood are we talking about here? How could it be? Now, what's the question about the wood? Like, why do we care? It says Eitz Shemen. So, okay, Eitz Shemen, not Eitz Shemen. Any idea? Everyone's flummoxed. Everyone's very quiet today. Okay, right? We're a little bit concerned. How are you taking a kind of the Erez doesn't have fruit, but how come you're taking something that is fruit giving? It means it cut down a lot of trees. You know, the those who are more ecologically minded, I guess, have a field day, very excited. Oh, they were so concerned about tashchit, right? Something here. So that is the Radak's question, though. The Radak says it. Here, we'll look at it inside. Atzei Shemen, Targumo, I the Zayt, the Targum, the official Aramaic translation is actually from Atzei Zayit. That's what it sounds like. So it was olive branches, olive wood. Ve'ein lishol ech shachat me'atzei ma'achal l'tzorach malacha. How do they cut down fruit-bearing trees to do the work? I can answer. Yesh lomar, I can answer. Ki karat hazeitim hazikenim she'eno osim peirot. It was old a wood of olive trees that no longer give fruit. V'chein ba'atzei ma'aracha. That was true also of the eitzim they would put on the altar. Shaben be'atzei te'ein va'atzei dekel. Sometimes from figs or from palms. So that's true. No more peirot, but you can have more peirot. What's the more peirot? They don't give fruit, but they can be part of the mikdash, service of Hashem. Beautiful. Maybe you could also explain that the olive wood is not olive wood, but oil wood. It's one of the types of tree that is in the cedar family. Oil comes out of it. The only tree that ever gave oil was olive trees? No. The other trees you make from this other tree also make from it pitch. Ulefichach nikra eitz shemen. Ki hine matzana be'ezra she'amar tzu ha'ara ve'viu ale zayit va'ale eitz shemen. So you see, ale zayit and ale eitz shemen were two different things in the days of Ezra. Inside shemen eno eitz zayit. It's two different things. So you don't have to say it's necessarily from olives. Maybe it was just something called the oil tree, the oil tree. Atzei shemen, wood of oil. Okay. Ralbag vayas badvir shnei kruvim atzei shemen. Same thing. And now he's wondering. He's more focused on the fact that the kruvim are here. So hine asat surat kruvim me'etz shemen v'hu mimine ha'arazim v'hu. Don't know what this word is. Kedi. Don't know. Bilaz ofin. Don't know. Right. V'yesh mimenu she'eno oseh perot v'ulai mizeh amin asa zeh o shalchu lo chiram v'lo hishchit Shlomo be'etz bezeh eitz ma'achal. Maybe it was sent him. It's not that Shlomo was cutting down fruit-bearing trees. The Chachamim are interested in telling us that he wasn't destroying fruit-bearing trees. Where does it say not to destroy fruit-bearing trees? It's in Parshat Shoftim, in the section about war, where it tells us not allowed Bal Tashri to waste and destroy trees needlessly. Whole debate, what does needlessly mean? This clearly was for a purpose, but no, he didn't necessarily do that. Gami Tachen, she is Zeh Achar Shiavesha Ilan. But that this was after the tree already dried up. It was dried out wood. You don't want moist wood. You're going to overlay gold on top. It's going to rot. It has to be dry. Okay. Now, says the Ralbag, arch rationalist that he is. It's a picture of this face of a child. Rashi had already said this in Parshat Truma, based on the Gemara, Keruvia. That's what it means. It's a young visage. Vizachar. Shekvar haya eser amot kol echad mehem b'koma v'rochav prisat knafav gam kein eser amot v'hinei hayu pnei akruvim ha'elu mabitim lifnei hanichnas sham. So these two, it mentions that it's eser amot. It already said that before, in its height and its width in terms of the wingspan, and it's also on the face. We're looking forward, so that the person who would come in, who was nichnas there, would see the face we're facing them. And the there was 20 amot was the width of the whole place. So here we learn that the kruvim we saw this already, let's explain it already outside, but something about the idea that now they were covered in gold, as opposed to being made completely of gold. Rav Meidan points out that why are you mentioning now that it was made out of wood and covered in gold? What else was made of wood and covered in gold? We talked about it, right? Remember the walls themselves? We'll see later. The shulchan and the menorah and all those things, they're going to be made straight up out of gold. Here it's made out of wood. Rav Meidan points out why it's made out of wood and telling us it's wood, and then it was covered afterward to tell you that it's part of the building. It's not one of the kalim, but it's part of the building, part of the design of the building itself. Hold the thought. It will be important shortly. Shelley asked me, it's like the law of shatnez, which doesn't apply to Kohanim. Yeah, you mean in terms of the fact that it looks strange that we'd be devising something that is not in the Mishkan and now appears in the Mikdash. Yeah, inachinami, something there. Oh, by accident, I give you the Ralbag twice. Sorry, that was a mistake. I was trying to give you the Radak. I mean the Malbim. I gave you the Ralbag twice. Oh, too bad. Happens. But the Malbim just adds in the idea that the Kruvim were equivalent, and the idea that they were equivalent to the old ones. They just were bigger. What old ones? There aren't old ones. Okay, but the idea that they had a certain size dimension, and one was the Dmut of a Zachar, and one was the Dmut of an Akeva, and now they were one facing the other. So the Gemara picks up this discussion and wants to understand. We're going to end with this source now. The Gemara picks up this discussion, and the Gemara in Bava Batra, Amar Rabnoi, Amar Shmuel, Kruvim ben Neis hein omdim. The Kruvim were actually, the way that they stood was itself miraculous. Shenemar v'chamesh amot knaf akruva echad, chamesh amot knaf akruva shenit, esamot, it's 10. So wait a minute. Gufayu heichavu kaimi. What about the body of the Kruv itself? There's wings coming out of it. Yeah. Okay. So Elishmamina, the Gemara learns, no, it was a miracle. It was a miracle. There was some kind of miracle, right? That it doesn't take up space. It's the Kruv itself. It doesn't seem to exist. It doesn't have a dimension, right? Again, because it kept saying that the kanaf was of the Kruv. Now, of course, there's an easy, simple pshat answer to this. The Pashtan would answer what? No. Why don't you just say that the wings were two wings that were like this, touching each other, and the Kruv was in front of it, and it was coming out of its back, so to speak, protruded exactly the same spot. So that's it. But on the level of Chazal, the level of Drush, again, which doesn't contradict the Pshat, but the idea that there's some kind of a nace, there's a miracle about the fact that the Kruvim, they exist, but on another level, they don't even exist. They don't take up any space. They are in the room, but they're not really of the room. You follow? Again, on the level of Pshat, I have an easy answer. On the level of Drush, this is what Chazal are doing. The Medrash, they're darshaning, there's a nace going on here. The existence of them is itself miraculous. It's like they're from another world. They're actually made out of wood and they're covered in gold, but the representation, what it is, and by they don't take up any space, in dimensions. So there's a question. Wait a minute. Abaye sounds like he's the Pashtan. He's the Pashtan. Makifla Abaye, Vadima bolted Gitana Golan Avukaime. Maybe they're like the way that the chickens, the wings come out from the back. They don't take up extra space. Yeah. So Rava also suddenly became a Pashtan. Makifla Rava. Vadilma Zesh Lokaneg. Maybe they were staggered. So it's not that they're literally touching, the wings were touching, but they were touching. There was an overlap. Maybe they were somehow standing in a directional way that they are diagonal, i.e., why do you have to say they're standing facing the front door of the Kodesh HaKodashim, the curtain? Why don't you say instead they're standing diagonally? And now everything fits. You get five cubits to the Kruv from the wall on the wing, 5 cubits protruding the other way, and the same thing the other way. So it was a diagonal, the two Kruvim. Matkifla Rav Huna, Bereid Rav Yeshua, V'duma Beita Ma'loi Ravach. Wait a minute. Maybe you could say, and again, another possibility, that maybe the dimensions inside were not 20 by 20. Maybe as it went up, it was moving out, right? So there was more space. And maybe the bottom tip of the wing is touching at 10 amot, but there's a top part of the wing that's coming out, so that really there's some space for where the Kruv might be. Makifla Rav Papa. Along came Rav Papa. He said, wait a minute. Okay, who said the wings are straight wingspans? Maybe they're a little bit bent. Makifla Rav Ashi. V'dilma shel chufei havu mishal chafi. Right? Maybe again, it comes back to another idea that maybe there's some way that they have some kind of something that's overlapping. I don't know. Yeah, strange. I don't really know the distinction, by the way, between Rav Ashi and Rava earlier on. So he said, "V'dilma zesh lo keneged zeh havu kaimi." It's like they were staggered, and now it's like they were overlapping. So it's actually touching. I don't know. It seems to say in the pshat that they were touching. Hard to know. Anyway, and then how did they stand? Keitzad hein omdin. How do they stand? Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar, chadam apneim ish el achiv, v'chadam apneim labayit. Oh wait, there's a machloket there also. How are their faces? Were they facing each other or were they facing the house? Ulamanda amar pneim ish el achiv. Wait a minute. What about if you want to hold it? The faces were facing each other. It says in Divrei Yami's edition, their faces faced the bayit. Again, we saw before. What is the bayit? Where's the bayit? The bayit's the walls of the house, the external wall, or is it an inner space? Lokashia. No. Lokashia. The Gemara reconciles. Kam bisman she saw osman tzon shalmakom. Kam bisman she saw osman tzon shalmakom. Right. One is when they're doing God's will. One is they're not doing God's will. Lamanda amufneim labayit. When another one says that they're sorry. So how do you reconcile? One place it seems to say that their faces faced each other. In the other place, it seems to say that their faces they faced the house. By the way, where did it say Pnei Ish El Achiv? That's in Sefer Shmot in the Mishkan. It's kind of mixing and matching, right? So according to the one who holds Upneim Labayit, that in the Mikdash they were facing forwards. Doesn't it say in the store in Truma Ufnei Ish El Achiv? What do you do with that? Right? Dimitzadei Atzduye. Right? What does it mean? That it means that it was some kind of a way that they had they were somehow facing each other. There was they were on some kind of an angle, right? They're a little bit sideways. So you reconcile the two. Right? The Tanya Unklus Hager Amar Kruvim Maset Tzatzuin Hein. What does it mean Maset Tzatzuim? That the Tzatzua here is some kind of imagery that was made, i.e., because they had this structure. Umitsudadin Pinayam Ketamid Niftar Merabo. Their face was turned like someone who was taking leave of their master. So out of a sense of reverence. So Pnei Ish El Achiv, the face faced in, the face faced out. That's where we have all these discussions about the different miracles that were going on. All right. You have all of these unresolved. How come? Nobody was ever in the Kodesh HaKodashim. In the second Beit HaMikdash, there was no such thing as this. Anyway, so they're not even recalling a tradition from Bayit Sheni. It didn't exist all the way back to Bayit Rishon. We don't know. We actually don't know. There's no actual resolution. Right? And that's why when I showed you before the artist rendering and they're facing forwards, what do you mean they're facing forwards? Actually, with the wingspan straight out, and that's how it is? Hard to know. Also, if the wings are not straight out, but a little bit up, so it could be 5 amot and 5 amot. So 10 total was 10, but then you put the kruv in the middle, and then but it was aiming upward enough, right? That it was in the aggregate, still 20 amot was the width of the room, but okay, 5 amot, but it's diagonal. So it ends up being, right, a longer, it's still 10 amot, 5 amot and 5 amot of the two wings, but there's still space for the kruv in the middle. And it's still going to keep to 20 because of the angle of the wings. Okay. Anyway, much more to say about it. This was sort of the pshat of all of these mysteries, which is not much of a pshat because we're still left with so many mysteries about it. And the truth is, it remains unresolved al yom hazeh. If we had more time, which we don't, we could parse some, I can't do all, but some of these opinions that we saw in the Gemara. What is the significance behind it? They're just trying to answer for the pshat of what happened. Why do we have to think that there was maybe a nay? So that one I actually gave you a little bit. I think the idea that the Kruvim existed and didn't exist kind of thing. But according to Rashi's rendering, at least, it's not that they were just stam there. They were also sochachin. But now the sukkah, the word sukkah, is from that as well. And actually, it's learned that way in the Gemara in Sukkah and Daf Hey. So about it being over and covering, and instead of 10 tfachim underneath, now it's 10 amot underneath, right? So also a dimension that changed. And the idea, of course, that now the Kruvim are anchored in the ground. They're standing on the ground, the terra firma of Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh, of Eretz Yisrael, etc. And now the Jewish people came home. It's not just a portable, and the Shekhinah will go wherever we go, but to know that the Shekhinah is Shora right here in Eretz Yisrael, well, not here, but in the place of the Mikdash, in Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim, in the place of the Harabayit, in the place of the Mikdash, and of course, is epicenter in the Kodesh HaKodashim. Anyway, that's all we have time for today. Next week, again, to reiterate, there will be a shir. I'm calling it a code share shir. It's partly for Melachim Alef, and it's partly going to be for Hanukkah. So hopefully we'll invite some other people, maybe who are off work, if they want to join us. Adkan for today. Have a great rest of the day.